first speaker of the day is Shannon Pestun, interviewing Nathaniel Arcand. So I'll pass it off to her. Again, if you are out and about, can we get you back to the pitch stage? We're going to start in 1 minute.
Is it on? Okay, we're good, we're good. Oki, Tansi, Tanishi, my name is Shannon Pestun. Art, thank you so much for organizing an incredible day and putting Indigenous voices at the heart of our technology scene. So welcome to everyone for coming. I am super excited about this fireside chat that I get to do with my friend's husband. Jolene Arcand is up in the audience as well, but this is Nathaniel Arcand. And Nathaniel is a multifaceted talent in the entertainment industry. He's made remarkable contributions as an actor and now as a producer. Born on November 13th, happy belated birthday in Edmonton. Your 3-decade-long career has really built about, is marked by your dedication to storytelling and to creative excellence. Initially known for your acting accomplishments, many of you might know him from Heartland. That's certainly where I have met your TV character, at least anyway. But you've been in various films and TV shows. You've expanded into production to amplify Indigenous stories and diverse perspectives. Your journey as a filmmaker reflects a steadfast commitment to storytelling, cultural preservation, and celebrating diversity in entertainment. I'm just getting a bit of feedback there. Thank you. Is that you? Okay, okay. So let's talk a little bit about who is Nathaniel Arcand. And if you were to tell us just a little bit about you in a soundbite, what would that soundbite be?
Hi, everybody. My name is Nathaniel Arcand, and I am an actor. Yeah, I think that would be it, maybe. I don't know.
I did say soundbite, so I mean, you really certainly nailed that. So when you think about your career, I mean, you've been an actor, you are an actor, you're moving into more of the producing space, the directing space. Where does this passion come from?
Well, I think for most of us here, grew up on TV, right? There's some of my age here. We grew up on TV solely. That was our thing. There was no video games. There was no, no Xbox, nothing like that when I was a kid. Outdoors were our playground, all that. But when TV came along, I was right there in front of it. I still remember shows I used to watch way back in the mid-'70s till now, I don't watch much TV at all in the last almost 10 years, but before that, I used to watch a lot of TV, knew all the shows, especially cartoons, right? And then for me, though, I think it was when I saw Chief Dan George at the theater, Little Big Man. My mom took me to the movie, and I remember that. And then there was some other things that I saw on TV, and I was watching these natives on television and trying to, but I remember that I think it wasn't a native movie in general that I was watching, but I remember watching Bruce Lee in Chinese Connection and him kicking the butts of these guys that, anyway, I said to my mom, I want to be that guy. And at 6 years old, I started learning martial arts, and I started trying to pretend I was this actor, So it was influencing to me at a very young age. At 6 years old, I was mimicking and doing these things and inspired by, and for me, yeah, I think that's what really, it wasn't until I was older that, 19 I think it was, yeah, I was 19 that I actually pursued it, but for 13 years, from 6 till 19, I was very interested, wanted to do it, but didn't know how. There was no avenues back in those days either, for natives. for like me. And then nobody telling me, oh, you should go audition, you'd be great for this or whatever. We thought it was always in Hollywood or elsewhere, not in Edmonton, Alberta, or Calgary, or anywhere else near here. That's where, and I didn't realize I could be that person anyway, you know? And then sorry.
You bring up an important point, though, because there's not a lot of role models, and so you're really painting a picture for what is possible. So now you're an emerging producer and in film and television, and you, in 2015 it was, you produced a short film called Sister Daughter, and that brought awareness to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And it won the best short at the American Indian Film Festival, among many other awards. And now you're going into the research to produce your next piece, which is going to be on the life of Job Lyon, a prolific Métis elder. How are you using film and media as part of Indigenous reconciliation?
I think, well, like you mentioned, Sister Daughter, I created that with a couple of friends back in, well, I don't know, almost 10 years ago now, but basically, before all this reconciliation, truth and reconciliation stuff came out, before, you know, we were already doing that, you know, trying to get people to realize there's other things going on in Native world, you know, the murdered and missing women, you know, like the water epidemics in the northern communities, all those kind of things, you know, just tons of stuff, really. I mean, a lot of things that people ignore, you know, that they don't want to hear about or talk about, you know, but now everybody's, you know, interested because, you know, it's in our faces all the time, and we know somebody now, and we're, you know, that close to that, you know, and when you get that close, and like I have been all my life, you know, a lot of those murdered missing women I've seen on like I went through the list and I saw the pictures, I knew at least 4 of them, you know, and one I went to school with. So it was very close to home. And when I created that show, it was only 28 minutes long, but man, I cried like 3-4 times watching my own show. So if you ever get a chance to watch, it's called Sister Daughter, and really it's just just touching base on the whole thing, really. It wasn't even the case. It was just a girl who went camping and lost her phone for a week, and then she came back and there's all this shit going on. She's like, what's going on? We thought you were missing, you know. False alarm, but, you know, still. And it was just a message to tell people, you know, this is what's going on in our world right now, you know. I'm sure it's going on in other places across the world, because it is, and human trafficking, all that kind of stuff, murders. And that's what we're just bringing more. At the time, we wanted to just bring more awareness to that fact. And then I won awards for it, but you know, that's not what it was for. It's just, for me, I just wanted to put that out there, you know, a different side of the story too, not just about the victim, but the victim's family, you know, and the people that are involved, you know. And even though it was about the girl, we barely see her. We see her in the beginning and we see her at the end, you know. So those kind of things for me are important to see. That, you know, for non-natives out there that don't know our world, you know, and the world we come from and what we go through and struggle on a daily basis, you know. It's, you know, a lot of us smile and joke and laugh about things, but that's just our cover, you know. We don't want to be sad and angry all the time, you know. So that's what I feel, you know, and I see. And so our people are, you know, find a different way to approach things, you know, with humor and laughter and some, you know, songs, you know, make us feel better and get us out of that, and look towards more, maybe a positive future, you know, and that's what the whole truth and reconciliation for me is about, is knowing these things, recognizing them, seeing them, and this is not for natives, but everybody else involved that sees these, that they see and empathize, sympathize, you know, with what's going on in the world. We're not that far apart, and you know, the only thing I see a lot of times the religion and the bullshit of it all, you know, and those kind of things, those little things that, you know, and that's what also we got to move past. That's part of the truth and reconciliation thing too, right? There's all sorts of obstacles we're going to have to go through for years to come, I'm sure.
Yes, thank you. And
sorry, I just wanted one more. I want to talk about my father's thing I'm doing
that's
too.
where I was about to take you
Yeah.
next, so thank you for that.
The other thing I've been doing now lately is researching on my father. His name is Joseph Blind, Joe Blind. He's from the Buffalo Lake Métis settlement and originally from, I can't remember the place, in Saskatchewan with his mom when he moved here when he was 2 or something like that, and the family moved to Alberta. But his is a rich history in terms of the truth and reconciliation, where he comes from being on the other side of that native coin, where back in the day, until 1963, natives, if you were a treaty, you weren't allowed off the reserve. And my father was a Métis. We still had to prove he was a Métis because he looked native. But when they found that out, he could roam around wherever the heck he wanted, but natives had to stay in their reserves, or they weren't allowed in town at a certain time, and whatever, all this kind of stuff was going on back then. But he was the middleman between two worlds. He was, you know, and that was his thing all of his life, you know. And he was always in between, and everybody liked him, you know. They're always in between the native world and the white world, you know. And myself too, when I grew up, I didn't even know any part of that stuff, but I found myself living in two different worlds I didn't even know of, you know. I just was living in these worlds, not knowing that that's so different or that's different from this. It just to me, it's normal, right? So the truth and reconciliation through my father was to just show his side of his life, and in that sense, where how he grew up and how he became the man he is today, you know, doing the things he does, becoming this person who's influential Métis leader in the struggle to be recognized as people, you know, all these years. And finally, this past year, there was something, what's it called again? The Métis thing we had, just the constant. Sorry, I'm losing my words in my head right now. I'm trying to think too many things, but anyway, my father was there, and he's been at them almost for over 50 years now, and just researching all of that back to those days before I was even born, reading all these things that they had to struggle with. There's not much difference. The housing's still the same, the water's still the same. All these years later, and they're still fighting for the same thing, trying to talk about, get the same things over all these years, trying to get over that hump, to give our people some respect and some, you know, or whatever that is, you know, recognition, you know. It's tough to see it from, because I'm treaty, right? My father's Métis, and I watched the Métis people struggle for forever, you know, and try to get monies or anything, housing, and I want to show that in my dad's biography, the struggles, you know, with what they went through, the job hunting, the jobs that were taken from them, or they had jobs taken because of these guys over here or that, non-natives, you know, and just lots of things people don't realize and understand. This is what's the fuel that fires us, fire that fuels us in our struggle, you know, towards what we're trying to do here, you know, and a lot of people just, they don't see that because they don't know. And somebody was talking about the only way you're going to see the truth is that if you got making a film or a TV series, let a native person write it and direct it, and you know, and then we'll show you, you know, on our side of the brain what we're going through, you know. And I mean, I was part of that Martin Scorsese film, and Killers of the Flower Moon, and I haven't seen it yet, but I hear that it's great. It's got a good story. It's you know, it makes you cry, all these things, but it was still told by Martin Scorsese and his writing crew, you know. So I think most important thing is that we tell it from our point of view, the natives of our native story, our history.
Done. Okay, here I'm back on. I'm live again. You know, you talk about the importance of storytelling and storytelling from an Indigenous worldview, but you also shared, you know, for many Indigenous peoples, walking in two worlds. And I want to talk about. Let's talk about Indigenous peoples as technologists, because we've always been technologists, we've always been entrepreneurs, we've always been innovative, and then we've always brought technologies to the world. So how has your own worldview been shaped by the last 7 generations, and what is it that you're working for the next 7 generations, and what opportunities are you hoping to create through your work today and the gifts that have been placed upon you in your roles?
It goes way back, probably hundreds of generations, I think, on this continent, that the storytelling, you know, our people have always been storytellers, from what I know, through history, oral history, and hundreds of, tens of thousands of years here on this continent, you know. We're finding little bits and pieces of that storytelling on the caves and stuff like that, all stuff that are just being found, and then realizing it's way older than they thought, you know, where we were here, our people, you know. And my ancestors, my elders always tell us, don't believe what those guys write, because our stories have been handed down to us hundreds and hundreds of generations. And we've been here since time immemorial, since this continent was built. Just like the frogs on the other side of the continent, as the frogs here on this continent, or any other animal that was there, these animals were here from the beginning of time, and that was us, you know. And I feel like technology nowadays is starting to, you know, help us with that, you know, in terms of that. But where I'm going with this, though, is that for me, it was, I think it started back in maybe the 40s, 30s, when the first native man was on. His name was Victor Thunderchild. And he was on this black and white movie film. And then, you know, that's the technology, and you know, that I think that, you know, seeing natives for the first time, Western or a European person, you know, to see a native person in the flesh, so to speak, on screen. So that guy, Victor Thunderchild, was one of the first native figures you ever seen on a television or a movie set, or on a big screen, whatever they had back then. And then, you know, I'm getting to the point of, and then fast forward into the 60s, 70s, now we got like Chief Dan George, and geez, I'm going blank with all the names, but there was a few guys back then, actors. And then we fast forward to the 80s and the 70s and 80s, and we got A. Martinez, we got Gary Farmer, we got Gordon Tatusis, we have Tantu Cardinal, and like the list just gets bigger and bigger over the years as we go through the time. And these people are all trailblazers of all the native storytellers, filmmakers, and actors that you see today, such as myself. I'm like the 3rd or 4th generation of that, you know. And it's not that many generations of actors, really. But you know, I'm one of many. I mean, a handful in this thing. I mean, there's starting to be more and more actors and performers out there now. But at one time, I go to audition, and the only people I had to worry about was Daryl Dennis, Adam Beach, and Dakota House. You know, I don't know where they are now. But, you know, now I go to auditions, and I don't even heard about 20 of the guys on there or something going for the same role. I'm like, wow. But, you know, good on them, you know. It needs more of that, because I always said that. It was like, there's so many white actors, so many Asian actors, so many black actors out there. They just oversaturate the whole thing. And in fact, you see it all the time. There's always white, there's always blacks, there's always Asians, maybe an East Indian person, whatever. But never a native. Where's the native cop? Where's the native doctor? Where's the native bypasser? You know, just some dude walking by. Now you get it. I mean, Alberta does it a lot. I know Alberta Filmworks and all the guys around here, of course, because there's, I mean, but, and then and other shows now, they're starting to, but before that, nothing ever. And I always was wondering, where's the natives in the world here? Like, is there no natives in the Marvel world either? Just so many different things. And that, with today's technology, you know, I think we're starting to make that breakthrough with becoming more recognized as a people, and not just one nation, but all the nations across Turtle Island here, you know. Like, a lot, I think for the most part, Canadians have seen Cree people, Nahiawaks, on TV, such as Gordon, Graham Greene is Ojibwe actually, though, but Gordon Tatusis, Tantu Cardinal, both Nahiawak Cree. Adam Beach is Ojibwe. Yeah, anyway.
I love what you said about Indigenous representation in the media and the roles even that we occupy in the media. So as you were saying, we're the First Nations doctors or professionals, and it's still how we're portrayed, and that's still a big barrier for a lot of Indigenous peoples, is how we are portrayed not just in media, but in mainstream media as well. So the work that you do, Nathaniel, is deeply personal. There's a huge element of your heart that goes into everything that you're working on. You're tackling some big issues. You're calling, you know, towards truth and reconciliation. How do you find that balance for yourself? And how do you keep yourself well holistically?
It's you know, everything, when in this business, yeah, you do a lot of movies, TV shows, and a lot of the stuff is close to heart, you know, because, you know, it's dealing with a native issue, and then you're part of that, and you got to research it, and then you have no real choice but to feel it. You know, you get involved, you become you just immerse yourself into these characters and these situations, right? And you feel the pain, you feel everything. And if you don't have a heart, I don't know what the heck, you're an actor. You need a heart as an actor. You need to feel these things so you can bring them out, and the pain and the sorrow of it all, and the anger, the happiness, all of it. You know, it's a lot of times when I leave set, when I've ever left set and on a very emotional scene, I'm left drained. You know, I'm so tired. I'm just drained because I put all my 150% into that moment. And we did it 20 times in 2 hours. I'm done. And that's because it just over and over and over. You're just putting yourself through that moment and that stuff, and you have no choice but to think about it and to feel it. And like I said, a lot of the shows I've ever been part of have always dealt with a native issue of some sort, whether it be missing murdered women or something atrocious in the history of man. I play a lot of history, like early 1800s and stuff like that, as these warriors on horseback getting killed by miners who thinking that you're trying to come attacking them, but you're just riding by on your own land and you get shot, you know. Trying to, you know, come out and tell somebody in the camp that they're going to get ambushed, but then somebody accidentally shoots you because you're native. There's a lot of things, man. I think about 20, 30 of my roles were like that, you know, getting killed for just being a native.
Well, thank gosh for Scott Cardinal of Heartland, where you got to be a vet and play with those cute little animals, and so thank goodness for that. So let's, I want to, you know, just also talk about, like, how do we take care of ourselves? And, you know, when we think about ourselves mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally, how do you do that in a world that has never moved as fast as it has today, but yet will never be as slow as it is again in this moment?
I think, I don't know what your gods or whoever you pray to, but I pray to Great Spirit, Gitchimantu Wankatonkan, Creator. I pray to him pretty much every day in the morning. And that's how I keep my spirituality and my soul as clear and clean as possible, and always trying to, you know, we cannot not think about bad thoughts, and we always try to think good thoughts. Those thoughts in our head go from here to here. It's where you focus your And that's where I try to stay focused in the positivity. Even though there's so much negative going on in this world, when I pray, I try to pray for the good always, you know, for everybody, not only my family, not only for my friends, but for other people like you guys, everybody out in the world, to feel the same way and to give nothing but love, you know, to all life, you know, whether that be a tree, a leaf, or, you know, an insect, your dogs and cats, all the other animals, everything, you know. This whole world is alive, you know. Everything we touch is alive, you know. It's got some molecules moving in there somewhere, everywhere, everything. It's all part of the organic world we live in. This is all organic, you know. Even the steel, the rocks, everything, you know. It all comes from us, from our ancestors, from everything that millions and billions of years of, you know, evolution. For me, it's important to stay healthy. Health is wealth. I quit drinking 10 years ago now, December 8th, or December 5th. No, December 8th. Those are two important dates in my life, 5th and 8th. I was married on the 5th, and my wife, and December 8th was when 10 years ago tomorrow, or I mean this next month, I'm 10 years sober. But that was the most important thing I ever did for myself too, to move forward, not knowing that this would be a trend now amongst the Native people. Lots of sober Natives out there now, sick and tired of being sick and tired, so to speak. And I applaud it, and I welcome it, and it's good to see healthy individuals making a better life for themselves and doing different things, and putting themselves in roles that we need. We need more doctors, we need more lawyers and all that. So my thing is, I just try to pray for all that. I go to the gym and I stay healthy, and that's my best way to add to that, you know, is take care of myself and my family, you know, as best as I can. That's the best I can do, you know, take care of myself and show my peers that, yes, you can do it, you know. Look where I come from, now look where I am today, you know.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your vulnerability and for sharing such a personal part of your story. And just thinking forward to the next 7 generations, my final question to you is, what words of wisdom do you have for other Indigenous peoples? And particularly, Elder Snow talked about our youth and bringing our youth forward. So how do we encourage more Indigenous peoples who want to use technology to drive change for our peoples and for our communities?
I think, for the most part, I think a lot of this generation now are totally into technology, right? I'm pretty sure. And as of the last generation too, we're like myself or other guys, they're totally into this technology. I think technology is driving us all. And my message to the young people is, if you can do something, make sure it's truth, and it's positive, and it's you know, and it has an impact on all of us, not just, you know. And, you know, peace, love, and happiness, you know, I think that goes a long way too, you know. I think most people don't know what that really is. They just got to search for themselves, you know. And hopefully you find that peace, love, and happiness in your own little world, you know, and pass it on and spread it around, you know, because we need more of that, more love than the hate that's going on right now in this world. And for me, technology is that way to push it forward, you know, to the other people, to show them that, yeah, we care, I care, you care, we all care, you know. We all care what's going on, you know. Even though it's not in our world right now here, but with all this other crazy shit going on, you know, we can voice our opinions through technology. We can show movies, TV shows, whatever, you know, songs, whatever, you know. I think we all have that power individually, you know. So no, we just use it positively, you know. And yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. A huge round of applause for you, Nathaniel, Arcand. Thank you. Thank you. Miigwech. Miigwech. Art. To the next one. I think that's me again. I get to say goodbye to you. Thank you so much. My friend Kara, if you can join me down here, please. Well, hi, Kara. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm happy to introduce you to Kara Thorvaldsen, who is my friend and colleague at Canada's Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub. And we're going to be having a little fireside chat about the importance of Indigenous women entrepreneurs and looking at Indigenous women as innovators, what some of the barriers are, what some of our research is showing, and how we can all collectively show up to advance Indigenous women. Our women play such an important role in our communities, in our families, and in our systems. But we certainly know that there are some barriers to overcome. So Kara, I want to just read your bio so that people get to know a little bit more about you. But you are our program manager at the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, and your work is focused on creating initiatives that drive an inclusive innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Alberta. You are an Indigenous woman originally from Treaty 1 territory, but you now call Treaty 7 home. Previous to your current role, I had the pleasure of working with you when you were the National Program Coordinator at our Indigenous Women Entrepreneur Hub, Mikwam Mikwa Ikwe, where you supported various research and innovation projects and did a lot of co-creation on programming alongside of organizations like NATOA, like the Indigenous Innovation Initiative and the Fireweed Fellowship. So thank you so much for having this conversation, and also to Indigitech and ART primarily for seeing the importance of having the conversation around Indigenous women as innovators and entrepreneurs. Oh yeah, you have to press.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Hi, everyone. Thanks for that introduction, Shannon. This is quite fun. Shannon and I have done a lot of work together and obviously have done a lot of talking, but never with an audience. So this will be interesting and fun. But I also have your bio. Should I read your bio? We haven't had a chance to really get to know you.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to introduce Shannon Pestun to you all. So, originating from the Métis homeland and Treaty 1 territory, Shannon resides in Treaty 7 territory and is a member of the Métis Nation of Alberta. Shannon is the Senior Advisor to the Diversity Institute for Canada's Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub and the 50/30 Challenge, where she supports the development of research and strategies that advance gender equity and diversity in leadership and helps organizations accelerate diversity strategies already underway. Shannon is also the CEO of Shannon Pestun Consulting, co-founder of the Finance Cafe, and a board member at Empower Canada. Prior to this, Shannon worked in the financial services sector, where she became known for her advocacy around women's financial inclusion and empowerment, and her role in setting the stage for gender equality in Canada's banking and financial services. She was later appointed to serve on Canada's Women Entrepreneurship Strategy Expert Panel. Her commitment to building an inclusive economy has made her a sought-after finance consultant and trusted voice for educators, government, industry, and media. Shannon is committed to bolstering Indigenous economic prosperity, driving economic growth, and bringing an Indigenous-centered approach to her work. In 2020, she created the Gifting Circle Bursary for Indigenous women entrepreneurs, raising over $150,000 in support for advancing Indigenous women's entrepreneurship in Canada. I think we need a round of applause for Shannon here and all that incredible work.
Well, thank you, Kara. What that bio doesn't say is that is like Shannon version, 47.0, because many people who I do know in this audience will know that Shannon, 16.0, 15.0 was a high school dropout, ran away from home, dealt with depression, suicidal thoughts, and life was just hard. So sometimes when I think about when I hear that bio, I am still Shannon at 16 years old that thinks, oh gosh, like where's my life? Where's my life going, and what is my purpose in it? So how blessed am I to do the work that I do, and looking at helping to shape the world for the future as well. So thank you, Kara.
Yeah, thank you so much. And just so honored to work alongside you and really support the ecosystem for women entrepreneurs and Indigenous women entrepreneurs in this country. So leading into our conversation, I'm wondering in what ways your work is shaping the future of Indigenous women in innovation and entrepreneurship.
So maybe let's start talking about the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, and what we are is a national hub. We are an ecosystem that was funded as part of the federal government's strategy to double the number of women entrepreneurs by 2025. That was pre-COVID days, so we did see, a decline, and we had to refocus what it was to champion the women's economy at that time. But the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub is made up of about 10 regional hubs that we work with. We've got about 300 partners across the country. And our work is dedicated to not just understanding women's financial positions, women's economic empowerment, but taking that deep intersectional lens and recognizing that as women, we are not a homogenous group. Indigenous women face different issues, Black women face different issues, newcomer women face different issues as well. So really putting a spotlight on that. When I think about how the work that we're doing is shaping Indigenous women entrepreneurs and where that fits into truth and reconciliation, is taking a look at women's roles and helping us reclaim our places and our power in society, in our economies, back into our families. For many Indigenous communities, we were matrilineal. Women played a very important role in the families, in our communities, in ceremony. And post-colonization, that changed, and it really hurt Indigenous women. More so, we see higher poverty rates, we see mental health considerations. We can take a look at some of the work that Nathaniel was talking about earlier around missing and murdered Indigenous women. And so the question for us is, what would it look like if every Indigenous woman had the power to create her own destiny, to create a business that could not only raise her own economic position, but that of her family, that of her community. When we take a look at women's entrepreneurship, we know that Indigenous women are starting their businesses at twice the rate of Canadian women generally. So there's a huge opportunity here, but when we think about the impact that has on community and on our families, our children are seeing a better path forward, our communities are benefiting, we're seeing that Indigenous women are bringing more social innovation, but that all my relations thinking that Scott, I always want to call him Scott from Heartland, darn it. I knew I was going to do that at least once. That Nathaniel was talking about. So, how many Indigenous women entrepreneurs are there in this country that we know? Is it 23,000 about from CCAB's research?
I believe so, yeah. And we've both had the great opportunity to get to study and know a lot of those Indigenous women who are innovating and leading the space in entrepreneurship, which is such an honor and it's so inspiring. We know that 33% of Indigenous-owned businesses are owned by women. And as you mentioned, they're more focused on social enterprises, incorporating the UN's SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So they're not only contributing to themselves, but really contributing to their community and also just the Indigenous ecosystem and Canadian economy in general.
Well, we were at the CCAB conference in October and looking at the Indigenous women in leadership and the stories that we're seeing, the advancement of women in our economies, in our corporations, as small, medium-sized business owners. We are making ripples of change, which is incredibly important, and it just feels good. The work that we do feels good. I know that you and I have met several Indigenous women entrepreneurs over the course of the past 5 years in our work, and I'm continuously blown away by the impacts that we're making. And we're not talking about small businesses, we're also talking about significant corporations, and I'll talk a little bit about Bobby Reset, an Alberta homegrown success story here, Indigenous women in tech, but there is that role for small businesses too. So why don't we talk about the importance, though, of accelerating Indigenous women's entrepreneurship and innovation?
Yeah, I was just going to lead you into that question, because that's a question I get a lot when I'm speaking to people at these events or conferences in general is, okay, so this is the work you do, but why is it important? Why do we need to be accelerating Indigenous women's entrepreneurship? And I think we touched on a few of those points already, that entrepreneurship can be a pathway to economic fulfillment for Indigenous women, for their families, communities. But maybe you want to elaborate on some of the other reasons that it's important that we accelerate this path.
Well, I think from Truth and Reconciliation, and again, just talking about reclaiming our power and our place, and saying we are still here and we belong here. And we also know that, there's such an importance of us being able to move in today's world from that resource-based economy to the knowledge economy, and our Indigenous women are certainly bringing us back to that. I think about 2/3 of Indigenous women are bringing traditional knowledge and cultural expression into their business. So this is bringing, reclaiming our cultures, reclaiming our language, reclaiming our ceremony. And so it's medicine in so many ways. And I think the other interesting thing too is that when we're looking at how women operate their business, they're decolonizing business. And what do I mean by that? I mean, it's not just about profits. And that can be a significant barrier for the ecosystem to understand, particularly the finance system, because it's so profit-minded. And we often don't have an economic framework to say, here's the economic impact of doing social impact or creating healthier communities, or bringing back our traditional systems, our traditional ways of being. So that's part of it. And the other thing that I would say too is that even though there's this will for Indigenous women to participate in the economy and show up as entrepreneurs, as they're doing in numbers, we know that they face greater barriers than other women in the entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem.
Yeah, and before we dive into those barriers, because I think it's very important that we all understand what those barriers are and the challenges and gaps that we've uncovered through our research. But I also just want to note that the Indigenous population is one of the youngest demographics in the country. And when we look at tech and innovation, there is such an opportunity to be bringing our young Indigenous people into that space. And I just wanted to add that because I know there's a lot of conversation today happening around tech. So definitely putting together those programs and encouraging Indigenous youth to engage in entrepreneurial and innovative activities, I think is of the utmost importance. But let's talk about some of those barriers that you mentioned, because there's quite a few of them, and part of our work is challenging those barriers and finding ways to overcome them.
Yeah, and I think it's an important conversation to have, Kara, because a lot of us are in the ecosystem. Maybe we work in financial organizations, or we can have a voice in these rooms. And there's sort of that, systemic or that societal lens of what is it going to take from a societal perspective to drive this? So we've got to challenge stereotypes. We have to challenge biases. But then we can take a look at an organizational level, and let's look at the venture capital industry, and let's look at the banking sector. And so the biggest barrier that Indigenous women, and actually that any entrepreneur faces, is access to financial capital. But you layer on different intersectionalities, different identities, and those barriers get greater. So in the venture capital space, it's no surprise to most of us in the tech system that women get about 2% of venture capital dollars. But Indigenous women are getting a sliver of that. And a perfect example is Bobby Reset, who of Virtual Gurus. I had the opportunity to interview her years ago, and I remember her saying to me she had 170 no's from investors. 170. So first of all, what gives somebody that courage and determination to keep going? Because most of us would stop, one, two no's. But 170 before somebody said yes. And it took an Indigenous investor, Raven Capital, to support her business. She is the first Indigenous woman to close a Series A round, and now she will be the first Indigenous woman to go into a Series B. But that's the venture capital space. If we look at debt financing, we think about traditional loans that come out of a banking institution. Many Indigenous women don't have great credit or credit at all. We might not have been part of the traditional financial system where we even had any access to banking or to understand how the banking system works. There's also the challenges of poverty and having very little intergenerational wealth, if at all, and little assets, personal assets, that not even to be pledged to security, because guess what? If you're from First Nations, you don't have any security to pledge. So you can't use your home as an asset like many entrepreneurs might do. And so it's really important to understand the dynamics at play around finances, but then we also take a look at the bias that's sitting within the people who are holding the purse strings to our financial organizations. So we need more Indigenous women in finance. We need more Indigenous women, not just in the banks, but in the venture capital space. And yet it's still even more systemic than that, because there's also different traumas around money and helping us play in a very capitalistic system that often isn't aligned with our values and how Indigenous peoples do define wealth. So those are the access to financial capital. But let's talk about social capital for a second.
Yeah, for sure. And I know finance is something we talk about a lot, and I like to describe it as we're trying to fit into a box that wasn't created for us. So there's a lot of work to be done in that space. But on top of finance, I mentioned getting youth and Indigenous women into the tech sector. And behind that, we also need to look at education, and access to education is definitely a barrier when it comes to technology and innovation. So we know that Indigenous women are the most underrepresented population in Canada, and few are enrolled in entrepreneurship at the post-secondary level. They're not getting that formal education. And at the same time, we recognize that access to education is impacted by cost barriers, also connection to urban centers, connectivity to technology, internet access, which we recognize can be a barrier in a lot of remote communities and rural communities. So just even accessing that education becomes a barrier in itself, never mind completing the entire education. And when we think about internet access, because I know we live in this virtual world now, we've been on Zoom for, oh my gosh, how long, and I still have tech issues almost every single day, I will say that. But we know that it's a necessity, and yet 2/3 of households in First Nations communities don't have reliable access to the internet. So how do you expect Indigenous women living in a remote community, living on reserve that doesn't have access to fast-speed internet, to engage in those education platforms, to start an online business, to engage in tech and innovation? It becomes increasingly difficult.
And having to move out of community, so that you are moving out of community into a big center to participate, which is harmful overall to the community. And I love the focus that you put on the fact that 2/3 of First Nations communities don't have the speed or the download speed. I'm not technologically savvy here, so whatever the speed is, they don't have the standard that most of us would have in urban centers. And I'd say the other barriers that we come across too is just women's roles in our families and in our community. So we still think about elder care, we think about child care. We know that more Indigenous women are the caregivers of their communities as well. So we have different considerations that we have to hold.
Yeah, we hold so many different roles, and the reality of it is when an Indigenous woman is an entrepreneur, sometimes that entrepreneurial journey has to take a back seat to all the other roles that she plays in her life. Like you mentioned, childcare, elder care, a member of the community. So just priorities are hard to manage. Time is hard to manage for all entrepreneurs, but I think that that's an extreme barrier for a lot of Indigenous women.
And finally, there's the attitudinal barriers that we overcome, because then we think about the impact of stereotypes. We think about our confidence, and confidence barriers are huge, but they're a compounding barrier. You add on the financial barriers, you add on the access to role models, the social barriers. When these all collide, then you have the compounding barriers of confidence. And we see a lot of confidence around the financial literacy and the business literacy as well. And if we haven't been taught the finances, you know, it's very hard to know how to create a sustainable, viable company. So lots of work to do, and also to say that a lot of the accelerators don't have that culturally safe learning environment. And I will talk about a couple, because there are a couple that I do want to highlight a little bit later.
For sure, yeah. And I was going to mention our See It, Be It database. I think we're going to dive into that a little bit later. But speaking to the accelerators and other programs that we're developing, I think it's important that we remember that nothing for us without us. So when we're creating these programs for Indigenous women, we need to be involving Indigenous women in those conversations and ensuring that they're seen and have access to these spaces that are currently lacking. But I'm interested.
Well, no, I want to stop, because you talked about See It, Be It. I want to keep us on this.
You want to jump onto See It, Be It?
I want to just jump right over.
Okay, good, because I want to jump there too.
So let's talk about the importance of See It, Be It, because if we don't see it, it's really hard for us to imagine that we can be in spaces and places that weren't designed for us. Kara, why don't you tell us a little bit about our See It database, and something to applaud that we have over 600 Indigenous women on our national See It, Be It database at the Women Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub, but let's talk about it.
Yeah, thank you. Great applause, and hopefully more. So I will urge you all that if you know an Indigenous woman entrepreneur or an Indigenous woman entrepreneur, any diverse entrepreneur in general that you'd like to nominate for our database, you can do so on the WEC website. You can come talk to Shannon and I after if you want to find out more information. But the See It, Be It database is a database of over 1,800 women entrepreneurs across the country, across all industries and sectors that are advancing in the space of entrepreneurship and innovation. And the heart and soul of the platform is to show that if you can see it, you can be it. I mean, I don't know how many times you've Googled entrepreneur and you see like the same 5, no other way to put it, white men.
Particularly in tech.
Yeah, you know, Jeff Bezos and Mark Zuckerberg, whoever you want to name, and that's just not an accurate representation of what entrepreneurs look like in this country. We are diverse, we are women, we are Indigenous. So the See It, Be It database really aims as a platform for youth and all folks to really get a sense of what amazing entrepreneurial ventures are happening across the country. So definitely check it out. I feel like every time I go on there, I'm finding out a new story, a new venture, and spending more money than I should from my paycheck on some of the businesses there, but it's so hard not to. So please check it out. Please nominate yourself or someone you know. It is a great opportunity to showcase and really break down that stereotype that we had talked about.
Let's flip your page.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no, sorry. Go back. I lied to you.
Go back? Oh.
Yeah, I do this to you all the time. Sorry.
Oh, you want me to go into that too?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I can definitely do that. But yeah, we can showcase, again, Shannon and I spoke of so many of the amazing Indigenous women that we get to meet through our work, and it's hard to even pick a few to talk about. I feel like my brain's just overwhelmed, but Shannon and I put together a list of some of the amazing women who are featured on our See It, Be It database. So Tiara Fraser, who we both had the chance to meet, she is the first Indigenous woman to launch her own airline in Canada and really sailing to new heights in the space of aviation for Indigenous women. We also know Jen Harper, who is the founder of Cheekbone Beauty, and she's changing the way youth feel about beauty and fashion. And I'm happy to announce that you can now buy her products in Sephora, so you can definitely see her products there. They are amazing. Her red lipsticks are to die for. And I know you mentioned Bobby Reset. Do you want to talk a bit about Bobby Reset?
Well, you know, we gave Bobby some good airtime today, so let's talk about Sage Lessert, who is a young woman who is challenging the way the financial system brings more Indigenous women into the investing space and really supporting the social impact. There's another entrepreneur who's in this room today. Her name is Jolene Arcand. We met her husband a little bit earlier, but Jolene is an Alberta-based artist and graphic designer. She created the artwork behind CBC Manitoba's Mother, Sister, Daughter project. which investigates the progress made on each of the calls to action under the Justice of the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. Thank you, Art. We were not supposed to be here today. We had another entrepreneur, Tracy Person, who was supposed to join us. She unfortunately is sick. She's a breast cancer survivor who is now launching a new early detection breast cancer app, and a lot of her company's social purpose is to go out into Indigenous communities where that level of care is even harder to access. So unfortunately, Tracy could not be here today, but her company is My Breast Day, another incredible story of a woman who's doing some incredible things. So these are just a few examples of the women entrepreneurs that we see who are trailblazing and creating a path forward.
Yeah, so again, I could go on all day about these women, and I really wish Tracy could be with you all today. Unfortunately, you're stuck with me, but that means I get to hang out with my good friend Shannon here. And Shannon, the next question I want to dive into is that Indigenous people only represent about 1% in Canada's tech sector, and women are the most underrepresented population in the country. So what are your thoughts for ensuring greater diversity in Canada's tech sector?
Yeah, this is such a big question, right? Because we want to think about what is the talent pipeline? Who is coming up in our education systems? First of all, how are we supporting youth being more exposed to technology? I will say that when we start getting into the corporation side of things, it's recognizing that this isn't a tick box, and that we have to make a true commitment to the calls to the reconciliation calls to action. And I know there's a lot of companies who are wanting to do the right thing, but sometimes these Indigenous reconciliation action plans get stuck in an HR department, so they're not embedded throughout the whole organization. There's no true targets that are attached to them, and we know that if it's not measured, it's not going to get done. So in tying these to performance metrics as well of our senior leadership, if we don't have the numbers, we're not going to be able to show where we're actually moving the dial. The other thing too is the importance of looking at trauma-informed approaches to learning and culturally relevant and sensitive programs. Lisa Moon is here from NPower doing some incredible work on the Indigenous tech pathways for youth. I see Zach Novak from City, who's doing a ton of work around creating a more diverse tech ecosystem. And from an entrepreneurial perspective too, we also have to recognize that every business today is a tech business. Like, there is innovation happening everywhere. We live in a very technological world, so challenging what we think as being the only definition of technology, we have to broaden that a little bit. And again, that finance system is going to be critical to being able to create a more inclusive system there.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I think it's important that we remember that Indigenous peoples were the original innovators, inventors, entrepreneurs. So yes, redefining what tech and innovation means. I'm also going to do a small plug for a lot of the research that's come out of WEC. We have an Indigenous report called Mikwam Mikwai Kwe. It's a national needs analysis on Indigenous women's entrepreneurship, and that report also provides over 30 recommendations for the ecosystem and different levels of the ecosystem to better support women entrepreneurs and innovators. So you can check that out on our website as well.
Absolutely, wek.ca, wekh.ca. I know we are at time. I see our friend Art, who's keeping us on time, on schedule. Art, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to highlight the importance of accelerating Indigenous women in innovation and technology.
Hello. So just take a bio break, 5 minutes, and we'll be back with our next kind of like series of speakers and talks and stuff. So check out the vendors. Go to the East Annex. USAY is there. They're an awesome youth organizations that are doing some really amazing things with technology. I strongly suggest you go say hi to Levi, check out their VR stuff. Amazing. IRC's over there. We have 2 booths from University of Calgary. We actually have Careers in Technology. We have Tacit Edge. We actually have SAIT. We have, I'm missing everybody, so just go and visit people and say hi.